Raffaella's hands trembled as she stared at the yellowed envelope in her trembling fingers. 10 years. 10 years of hatred, of sleepless nights, of believing that the man she loved more than life itself had sold her out to his enemies. The elegant penmanship on the front read simply, "For when you're ready to know the truth, D." The sound of footsteps echoed through her small apartment, and she knew without looking that it was him. Donato Salvatore had found her again, just like he always did. But this time she had the envelope. This time everything would change. "You kept it," his deep voice rumbled from the doorway, and she could hear the mixture of hope and pain that had haunted his words for a decade. Raffaella turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs as she faced the man who had destroyed and saved her in equal measure. He stood there in his perfectly tailored black suit, still devastatingly handsome at 35, still carrying that dangerous aura that made grown men bow and enemies flee. But his dark eyes, those eyes held a grief so profound it took her breath away. "Why now?" she whispered, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. "After all these years, why are you letting me see this now?" Donato stepped into her modest living room, his presence immediately making the space feel smaller, more electric. "Because you finally stopped running long enough for me to catch you, and because—" He paused, his jaw clenching with emotion. "Because I can't watch you hate me for something I never did." This story of love, betrayal, and shocking revelations is just beginning to unfold. To follow Raffaella's journey of discovery and join our growing community of story lovers, please subscribe to our channel. We're working toward 2,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. We love hearing from our amazing audience worldwide. 10 years earlier, Raffaella Romano had been 22 years old and desperately in love with a man she thought was just a successful businessman. Donato Salvatore owned restaurants throughout New York, drove expensive cars, and treated her like a princess. What she didn't know was that he was also the heir to one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. The night everything changed started like any other. She had been working late at the small accounting firm where she balanced books for local businesses, dreaming of the future she and Donato had planned together. They were going to be married in the spring. She was going to finally meet his family. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. The memory still played in her mind like a broken record, coming home to find their apartment ransacked, federal agents waiting in her living room, and a recording of Donato's voice giving detailed information about her father's illegal gambling operation, the operation she didn't even know existed. "Miss Romano," Agent Harrison had said that night, his face grim as he played the recording again. "Your boyfriend has been feeding us information about your father's activities for months. He's the reason we know about the money laundering, the illegal betting rings, the connections to the Torino family." She had listened in horror as Donato's voice, crystal clear on the recording, provided dates, locations, and names. Her father, her innocent father who worked 2 jobs to keep their family afloat, who she thought was just struggling to make ends meet like everyone else in their neighborhood. "He's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity," the agent had continued. "We thought you should know before the arrests begin tomorrow." That night, she had packed everything she owned into 2 suitcases and disappeared. She left New York, left her family, left her entire life behind. She couldn't face the man who had betrayed everything she held sacred, and she couldn't face the father who had been living a double life she never suspected. Now, standing in her tiny apartment in Denver, 10 years and a lifetime of pain later, she worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. She cleaned offices before dawn, taught ESL classes in the afternoon, and waitressed at night. It wasn't the life she had dreamed of, but it was honest. It was safe. It was hers. Until tonight, when her past had literally walked through her door. "You changed your name," Donato said quietly, his eyes taking in her modest surroundings. "Raffaella Martinez now. You learned Spanish, started over completely." "I had to," she replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "After what you did, I couldn't be Romano anymore. I couldn't be the daughter of a criminal or the girlfriend of an informant." Something flashed across his face, pain so raw and immediate that she almost stepped toward him before catching herself. "Is that what you think I am? An informant?" "I heard the recording, Donato. I heard your voice giving them everything they needed to destroy my father." He was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Open the envelope, Rafaela." "No." She backed away, shaking her head. "I can't. I won't let you manipulate me again. I never manipulated you." His voice was sharp now, desperate. "Everything between us was real, every kiss, every promise, every moment we spent dreaming about our future. It was all real." "Then explain the recording. Open the envelope and I will." They stared at each other across the small space, 10 years of hurt and love and betrayal hanging between them like a living thing. Finally, with shaking fingers, Rafaela tore open the yellowed envelope. Inside was a single photograph and a letter written in Donato's careful handwriting. The photograph made her gasp. It was her father, but not as she remembered him. This was her father in an expensive suit, shaking hands with men she didn't recognize, standing in front of a building she'd never seen. The letter began, "My beloved Rafaela, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and you believe I betrayed you." Rafaela sank into her small armchair, the letter trembling in her hands as she read Donato's words from 10 years ago. "The recording you heard was real, but not complete. What the FBI didn't play for you was the rest of the conversation, where I told them I would never testify against your father. What they didn't tell you was that your father wasn't just involved with the Torino family. He owed them $3 million, money he had stolen from their operations over the course of 2 years. Her breath caught in her throat. $3 million. Her father, who worried about the electric bill. The men your father was stealing from don't forgive debts, Rafaela. They were planning to kill him, and when that didn't satisfy them, they were going to come for you. The only way to save your family was to make it look like I had betrayed him to the FBI. The recording was staged, designed to make the Torinos think your father was worthless to them as a dead man because the FBI already had everything they needed." Donato moved closer, his voice soft but urgent. "Keep reading. I gave the FBI just enough real information to make the recording convincing, but nothing that would actually hurt your father. The gambling operation they mentioned? It was real, but small time. The money laundering? That was information about the Torino operation, not your father's. I sacrificed my relationship with you to save your life, and I would do it again." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she kept reading. "By the time you read this, I will have taken your father's debt onto myself. $3 million that I will pay to keep you safe. Your father will go to prison for 2 years maximum on the small charges I had to make real, but he will be alive. You will hate me, but you will be alive. That is a trade I can live with." The letter was signed simply, "Forever yours, Donato." The photograph, Donato said quietly, was taken 3 days before that recording. "Your father meeting with Giuseppe Torino. That was the night Giuseppe told him he had 72 hours to pay his debt or watch his daughter die." Rafaela looked up at him, her heart shattering and rebuilding itself simultaneously. You saved us." "I tried to save you. Your father was beyond saving. He had made his choices, and I couldn't undo them. But you were innocent. You are innocent." She stood slowly, her legs shaking. "The $3 million was the down payment on your safety. I've paid much more than that over the years, making sure the Torino family and their successors know that touching you means war with the Salvatores." The weight of 10 years of misunderstanding crashed down on her. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think? Because if you had known the truth, you would have tried to stay and fight. You would have gotten yourself killed." His voice broke slightly. "And because I needed you to hate me enough to disappear completely. If the Torinos thought you still meant something to me, they would have hunted you forever." Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass echoed from the apartment's front window. Donato immediately moved in front of Rafaela, his hand going inside his jacket for what she now realized was undoubtedly a weapon. "They found us," he said grimly, pulling out his phone. "Vincent, I need extraction at the Denver safe house. Now. And bring everyone." "Who found us?" Rafaela's voice was barely a whisper. Donato's jaw was tight as he moved toward the window, staying low. "The Torinos are all dead, but their operation was taken over by the Morettis 5 years ago. Apparently, they have long memories and longer grudges." Another window shattered, this time in her bedroom. Donato grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the apartment. "There's a fire escape," she said, her mind racing even as terror flooded her system. "No, they'll expect that. He was scanning the apartment with the practiced eye of someone who had been in similar situations many times before. The bathroom window. Does it face the alley? Yes, but it's tiny. You'll fit. I won't. But you will. The front door exploded inward, and men in dark clothing began pouring into her small apartment. Raffaella found herself pressed against Donato's chest as he backed them toward the bathroom, his gun now drawn and pointed at the intruders. "Donato Salvatore," one of the men called out in accented English, "you've led us quite a chase. 10 years of watching and waiting for you to visit your little whore." Raffaella felt Donato's body go rigid with fury. "She's innocent. She's the reason our operation lost $3 million. She's the reason Giuseppe Torino died in prison. Nothing innocent about that." They were in the bathroom now, and Donato was already forcing the small window open. "You're going to climb through this window and run," he whispered urgently in her ear. "Don't stop running until you reach the police station on 5th Street. I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." He turned to face her, his dark eyes blazing with an emotion so intense it took her breath away. "I've spent 10 years keeping you safe, Raffaella. I'm not stopping now." "Salvatore," the voice was getting closer. "We know you're back there. Come out and we might let the girl live long enough to watch what we do to you." Donato's jaw clenched, and Raffaella saw something dangerous flash in his eyes, something that reminded her that no matter how gentle he had always been with her, he was still one of the most powerful crime bosses on the East Coast. "Listen to me," he whispered urgently, his hands framing her face. "These men are not going to let either of us walk out of here alive. In about 30 seconds, this bathroom is going to become a war zone. You need to trust me one more time." "I've trusted you this whole time," she whispered back, finally understanding the depth of his sacrifice. "Even when I hated you, I trusted you. That's why it hurt so much." Something beautiful and broken crossed his face. "I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day in 10 years. The sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. "Go," he mouthed, helping her toward the window. But Raffaella had spent 10 years believing she was weak, helpless, a victim who needed saving. Those 10 years had been hard, but they had also made her strong in ways she was only now beginning to understand. "No," she said firmly. "We go together, or we don't go at all." "Raffaella, I'm not 22 anymore, Donato. I'm not the naive girl who needed you to sacrifice everything to save her." She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "I'm a woman who has survived 10 years on her own, and I'm not losing you again." The bathroom door exploded inward just as Donato's backup arrived through the front of the apartment. The sound of gunfire filled the small space, and suddenly Raffaella understood exactly why Donato Salvatore was feared throughout the criminal underworld. He moved with deadly precision, protecting her body with his own while returning fire with the kind of accuracy that spoke of years of experience in exactly these situations. But it was clear they were outnumbered. "The window," he said again, more urgently now. "Together," she insisted. "I can't fit." "Then we find another way." A bullet shattered the mirror above the sink, sending glass raining down on them both. Raffaella could hear men shouting in the hallway, some in English, some in what sounded like Italian. The cavalry had arrived, but she couldn't tell if they were winning or losing. "Vincent!" Donato called out over the chaos. "Boss! South stairwell is clear." Donato grabbed Raffaella's hand, and together they ran from the bathroom toward the front of her apartment. The scene was like something from an action movie. Overturned furniture, men in suits engaged in firefights, the acrid smell of gunpowder filling the air. "Stay behind me," Donato commanded, but Raffaella noticed that his voice held a different quality now. This wasn't the gentleman who had loved her 10 years ago. This was the head of a crime family, a man who had built an empire on respect and fear in equal measure. They made it to the front door just as another wave of attackers came up the main stairwell. Donato's men, and she could see now that there were at least 8 of them, formed a protective circle around her and Donato as they fought their way toward the exit. "The car!" Vincent shouted from somewhere behind them. They burst through the front door of her building into the Denver night, and Raffaella gasped at what she saw waiting for them. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows sat running at the curb, their doors already open. Men in expensive suits and tactical gear were positioned at strategic points around the street, and she realized that this wasn't just a rescue. This was a full-scale military operation. "How many people work for you?" she asked as Donato pulled her toward the middle SUV. "In Denver? About 50. In the entire organization." He helped her into the back seat, his hand gentle despite the chaos around them. More than you want to know. As they pulled away from her apartment building, Raffaella could see flames beginning to lick at her windows. Her entire life for the past 10 years, her books, her photographs, her carefully built identity as Raffaella Martinez, was going up in smoke. "I'm sorry," Donato said quietly, following her gaze. "I'll replace everything. It's just stuff." But her voice was shaky. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't follow." He took her hand, and she was surprised by how natural it felt after all these years. "I have a house in the mountains. No one knows about it except Vincent." She looked at their joined hands, thinking about everything she had learned in the past hour. "Donato, what happened to my father, really?" His jaw tightened. "He served 18 months in minimum security prison. When he got out, I gave him a choice. Disappear completely and live quietly on a pension I would provide, or stay in New York and risk the Morettis eventually finding him. He chose to disappear. He chose to live. I've been sending him money every month for 8 years. He owns a small fishing boat in Key Largo now. He's safe." Tears filled her eyes again. "Does he know I'm alive?" "He knows you're safe. That's all I could tell him without putting you both at risk." The SUV climbed higher into the Colorado mountains, leaving the lights of Denver far behind. Raffaella stared out the window at the star-filled sky, processing the fact that everything she thought she knew about the past decade had been wrong. "Why now?" she asked finally. "Why reveal the truth now?" Donato was quiet for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because Giuseppe Torino's son turned 21 last month. And because young men with something to prove and old grudges to settle don't think as clearly as their fathers did." He turned to look at her, and she could see fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "Because the Morettis have been planning this for months, and I couldn't protect you from a distance anymore." The safe house was nothing like what Raffaella expected. Instead of the stark utilitarian hideout she had imagined, Donato's mountain retreat was a beautiful log cabin with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over snow-capped peaks and a valley filled with evergreen trees. "You built this place for me," she said quietly, standing in the spacious living room with its massive stone fireplace and comfortable furniture. "How did you know?" She gestured toward the bookshelves lined with romance novels, her favorite guilty pleasure that she had shared with him years ago. The kitchen was stocked with all the teas she loved. There were paintbrushes and canvases in the corner, ready for the art hobby she had always wanted to pursue but never had time for. "You've been watching me." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. "I've been protecting you," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." Vincent appeared in the doorway, his expression serious. "Boss, we need to talk." Donato nodded, then turned to Raffaella. "There's a bedroom upstairs with everything you need. Try to get some rest." But as he started to follow Vincent outside, Raffaella caught his arm. "No more secrets, Donato. Whatever he has to tell you, I need to hear it too." The two men exchanged a look, and then Donato nodded. "Vincent, what do we know?" "The Morettis hit 4 of our businesses tonight. They're not just after her. They want to start a war. They think with the other families focused on their own territories, they can move in on ours." "How many men?" "They brought about 40 into Denver. But boss," Vincent's expression was grim. "There's something else. They have photographs." "What kind of photographs?" Vincent pulled out a tablet, showing them surveillance photos that had clearly been taken over many months. Raffaella saw images of herself walking to work, teaching her ESL classes, serving tables at the restaurant. In every single photo, there were red circles drawn around her, and in the margins, someone had written notes in Italian. "What do they say?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Donato's face had gone white as he read the notes. "They know where you work. They know your schedule. They know you send money to a children's charity in New York every month." He looked up at Vincent. "How long have they been watching her?" "Based on the timestamps, at least 6 months." Raffaella felt her knees go weak. 6 months. "Which means they've been planning this since before Giuseppe's son reached majority," Donato said grimly. "This isn't just about revenge anymore. They're using you to get to me, and they're using our war as an excuse to expand their territory." The reality of the situation crashed over her like a cold wave. "I can't go back to my life, can I?" "Not the life you had," Donato admitted. "But Raffaella, you have to understand, I never wanted this for you. I wanted you to be free, to be happy, to build a life that had nothing to do with my world." And I did. For 10 years I did exactly that. She looked around the beautiful cabin, thinking about her tiny apartment with its second-hand furniture and her 3 jobs just to make ends meet. But I wasn't happy, Donato. I was surviving, but I wasn't living. He stared at her, and she could see hope and fear warring in his dark eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe it's time to stop running from the truth. She took a deep breath, feeling stronger than she had in years. I love you. I've always loved you. I spent 10 years hating you for something you never did, while you spent 10 years sacrificing everything to keep me safe. Rafaela, I'm not finished. She stepped closer to him, close enough to see the silver threads in his hair that hadn't been there 10 years ago, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years of worry and responsibility. I understand what your world involves. I understand the danger, the violence, the moral ambiguity, but I also understand that you are a good man in an impossible situation, trying to protect the people you love. Vincent cleared his throat uncomfortably. Boss, maybe I should give you some privacy. Stay, Donato said, his eyes never leaving Rafaela's face. She needs to understand exactly what she's saying. I do understand. You're the head of a crime family. You make decisions that cost people their lives. You operate outside the law, and you've built an empire on fear and respect. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight roughness of his 5 o'clock shadow. You're also the man who gave up the woman he loved to save her life, who spent $3 million and 10 years of loneliness to keep her safe, who built her a house in the mountains and filled it with all her favorite things, just in case she ever needed a place to heal. Tears were running down his face now, and she was struck by how different he looked when he let himself be vulnerable. This was her Donato, the man who used to bring her flowers just because it was Tuesday, who would hold her during thunderstorms because she was afraid of lightning. I can't ask you to live in my world, he whispered. You're not asking, I'm choosing. She went up on her toes and kissed him softly at first, then with all the pent-up love and longing of 10 years apart. When they broke apart, both of them were shaking. Boss, Vincent said urgently, we've got movement in the valley. Donato immediately shifted back into protective mode, but this time Rafaela was ready for it. She wasn't going to be the helpless victim anymore. How many? She asked Vincent directly. He looked surprised that she had addressed him, but answered readily. 12 vehicles, maybe 40 men. And how many do we have? 15 here at the cabin, another 30 about 20 minutes out. She turned to Donato. What's the plan? The plan is to get you out of here safely. No, she said firmly. The plan is to end this. Tonight. I won't spend the rest of my life running from people who want to hurt me because of something my father did 20 years ago. Donato stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. You're not the same woman I fell in love with 10 years ago. No, she agreed. I'm stronger now. The question is, can you love this version of me? His answer was another kiss, this one fierce and claiming and full of promise. When he pulled away, his voice was rough with emotion. I've loved every version of you, Rafaela Romano, and I'll love every version you become. The battle for the mountain cabin lasted 3 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Moretti Operations Denver branch. Rafaela spent most of it in the reinforced basement that Donato had apparently built, specifically for situations like this, but she could hear everything. The gunfire, the shouted commands, the sound of vehicles racing up and down the mountain roads. When silence finally fell, she emerged to find Donato standing in the living room, his suit jacket ruined and a cut above his left eyebrow, but otherwise unharmed. Vincent and several other men were efficiently cleaning up evidence of the battle, and she realized that this was probably a routine they had performed many times before. Is it over? She asked. This part is over. Donato pulled her into his arms, and she could feel the tension leaving his body as he held her. There will probably be retaliation attempts, but nothing like this. The Morettis won't have the resources to come after us again for a long time. And my father? Already moved to a new location. He'll be safe. She pulled back to look at his face, taking inventory of his injuries. You're hurt. It's nothing. Vincent's status report. All Moretti operatives neutralized. No casualties on our side. The local authorities will find evidence that this was a drug deal gone wrong between rival gangs from out of state. The cabin is clean. Rafaela marveled at the efficiency of it all. This is what your life is like. This is what my life has been like, Donato corrected. But it doesn't have to be what our life is like. She studied his face carefully. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've been thinking about retirement for a long time. I'm 35 years old, Rafaela. I've been running this organization since I was 22. I'm tired of the violence, tired of the constant threat, tired of making decisions about other people's lives. Vincent looked up sharply from his tablet. Boss? Vincent's ready to take over operations. He's been my right hand for 8 years and he understands the business better than anyone. The family will be in good hands. Rafaela felt her heart stop. You would do that? Give up everything you've built? I already gave up everything once to keep you safe. This time I'm giving it up to be with you. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing over her cheekbone. I want the life we planned 10 years ago. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to argue about what to watch on TV and whose turn it is to do the dishes. I want normal, boring, everyday happiness. But this is who you are. No, he said firmly. This is what I became because I thought I had lost you. You are who I am, Rafaela. You always have been. She felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of joy rather than grief. What about your responsibilities to your family, your people? Vincent will take care of them, and honestly, most of our operations are legitimate now anyway. The restaurants, the construction companies, the import businesses, they're all completely legal. The criminal side of things has been winding down for years. Vincent stepped forward. Boss, are you sure about this? Donato looked at the man who had been like a brother to him for nearly a decade. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. This organization will be stronger under your leadership anyway. You don't have my emotional complications. Rafaela laughed through her tears. Is that what I am? An emotional complication? You are everything, he said simply. You're my heart, my soul, my reason for breathing. Everything else is just details. As dawn broke over the Colorado mountains, Rafaela found herself standing on the deck of the cabin, looking out over the valley where she had almost lost everything, and instead found her future. Donato came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. So what happens now? She asked. Now we plan a wedding, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. A real one this time, with your father there to walk you down the aisle and all our friends celebrating with us. Your friends are mostly criminals. Ex-criminals, he corrected with a chuckle. And besides, you'll like Vincent. He makes excellent pasta. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had sacrificed everything for her, not once but twice. I love you, Donato Salvatore. I love you too, Mrs. Salvatore-to-be. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but bright. There would be challenges. There always were when two people chose to build a life together. But Rafaela had learned something important over the past 10 years. She was stronger than she had ever believed possible, and love, real, honest, sacrificial love, could survive anything, even a decade of hatred that was built on the most beautiful lie ever told. 2 years later, Rafaela Salvatore stood in the garden of their new home in Napa Valley, watching her husband teach a cooking class to 12 formerly at-risk teenagers from San Francisco. The non-profit cooking school they had founded together was thriving, and seeing Donato channel his natural leadership abilities into helping kids build legitimate careers filled her heart with joy. Mrs. Salvatore, one of the students called out, Mr. Donato is trying to teach us to make pasta, but he keeps talking in Italian and we don't understand half of what he's saying. Rafaela laughed, walking over to the group. He does that when he gets excited about food. Donato, English, remember? Her husband looked up from the pasta machine, flour in his dark hair and a grin on his face that made him look 10 years younger. Sorry. When I was learning to cook, my nonna only spoke Italian in the kitchen. Old habits. Your nonna was in the mafia too? Asked Marcus, one of their favorite students. Marcus, another student hissed, but Donato just laughed. No, Marcus, my nonna was not in the mafia. She was just a very stubborn Italian woman who believed that food made with love tastes better than food made with just skill. And what do you believe? Rafaela asked, settling into her favorite spot where she could watch him work. I believe, Donato said, his eyes finding hers across the crowded kitchen, that she was right. Everything is better when it's made with love. The teenagers groaned good-naturedly at the obvious romantic undertone, but Rafaela didn't care. After 10 years of believing that love was something that could be destroyed by circumstances, she had learned that true love was actually something that could survive anything. Distance, time, misunderstandings, Even a decade of hatred built on the most necessary lie ever told. Vincent, now the successful head of what had become a completely legitimate business empire, visited every few months with his wife and twin daughters. Rafaela's father had walked her down the aisle at their wedding and now called every Sunday to check on them both. And sometimes late at night, when they lay in each other's arms listening to the sounds of the California countryside, Rafaela marveled at the fact that the worst thing that had ever happened to her had actually been the first step toward the greatest happiness she had ever known. Love, she had discovered, was worth waiting for. Even if you had to wait a decade to understand it properly. This incredible journey of love, sacrifice, and redemption has come to an end, but the emotions it stirred will linger long after the final words. If this story touched your heart, moved you to believe in the power of true love, or reminded you that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the greatest losses, please show your appreciation with a like and share it with someone who believes in happily ever after. New stories of passion, drama, and love conquering all odds will be here soon. Until our next journey together, keep believing in love.